victory here, guaranteeing, which I don't even know how this became a fight between NARC and in Cobra, but they literally believe that coming here after the 65 Immigration Act entitles them to reparations akin to those of us who descend from U.S. chattel slavery, the American freedmen specifically. Uh, and so this became a huge fight, and it is a fight at the federal level. Right now, we're trying to stop NARC and in Cobra from getting an executive order signed by Biden, which literally lacks specificity of those of us who have been harmed by slavery, by its vestiges. They are literally have a bill in front of President Biden to actually sign for an HR 40 study that lacks specificity. And here we managed to get that specificity with the help of the grassroots all over the country. Cynthia and Arthur can be considered amongst the co-founders of the contemporary reparations movement, which I liken to the second civil rights movement. Okay, this is the second and most important one. As far as I'm concerned, it's not to cast a rag or put a rag on the efforts of our ancestors that preceded us with civil rights and affirmative action. But as we see, if we aren't in this space consistently, putting a gate up around what we are owed, uh, you will have $5 white freedmen, $5 Hispanic freedmen, $5 Asian freedmen. And so, unakin to what has happened with civil rights and affirmative action, which predominantly benefit white women, LGBTQIA, and immigrants, we here in the state of California, with the help of our grassroots from all over the country, are putting up the gate and making sure reparations is given to those of whom it's directly owed, which is the American freedmen that descend from U.S. chattel slavery. We are the ones suffering those vestiges, not the immigrant class, not the white folks, not the LGBTQIA. So with that being said, I am so thrilled because I remember telling my church that I was a co-founder, that this was in the very early stages when we found each other by way of being political educated in this space. We found each other all over the country and we started up chapters. And I was so excited. I went to tell my very new thought church that I was engaged and involved in the second civil rights movement and demand for reparations. Well, they kind of looked down their noses, some of them. Some of them weren't too pleased that I was getting involved because, I come from a new thought, metaphysical, Christian, Bible-based church, right? And so it is our belief that we are the image likeness of God and that we've got mastery, power, dominion, and authority over everything. Like we are as much one with the Mother, Father, Spirit Divine as was Black Jesus. Okay, so we ascribe to that doctrine. So when you talk about reparations and you're talking to people who have manifested prosperity through the way they think and through their understanding of the Christ nature in which they were birthed, then you've got the people looking at you side-eyed like, why are you fighting? Because to fight for reparations sometimes can land on people, my parishioners in particular, as if you are now believing in lack. And so I had to stand down and let them know that, yeah, while we have an understanding of our entitlement as the image likeness of God, there's a whole bunch of us that don't. Furthermore, this is not about charity. This is not welfare. This is a debt that is owed in the quadrillions over multi-generations. So you can't look at me as if I am fighting in a space of lack. You have to look at it as in what you teach in this Bible, which is pay Caesar what is owed. Well, it's time for Caesar to pay those of us who descend from U.S. chattel slavery what it owes, what it killed and stole. And so it kind of created a little, fracture with me and my church. Not that I don't love them, not that I don't still rock with them to this day, but let's fast forward 4 years later, and now we have a whole entire colloquium central to the theme of reparations. Look at God. Well, see, that's what happens when you awaken the Christ within yourself and you say, this is my ministry. This is what I'm fighting for. This is what I'm told. My inner Christ told me to go and do, akin to what their inner Christ has told them to go and do. And so now we've got this amazing 2022 colloquium on reparations with some of the most esteemed people in the reparations fight. I'm almost done, so I'm going to take a breath in just a second. This is a Johnny Coleman Theological Seminary where I obtained my teacher's license in metaphysics. Okay. The 2022 colloquium on reparations, and the question they're asking is, what does the Bible say? You don't want to miss it. It's going to be epic. Let me tell you real quick who's over here, who's going to be on this panel. We've got lead economist Dr. William Sandy Darity, his wife, A. Kirsten Mullen. We've got the president of the UFBL, which is the Universal Foundation for Better Living. That is the organization that houses all of the sister churches. That's the very esteemed Reverend Sheila McKeithen. She's an attorney. We've got Edwin Chemerinsky, who is huge out here. He's an attorney that came onto the AB 3121 task force hearings to tell the esteemed members of the task force that you cannot do race-based reparations because that can be challenged at the federal level. He's going to be on that panel along with Dr. Matthew Woodfork, PhD. And we've got other co-founders of the contemporary grassroots reparations movement. We've got Friday Jones, Marlon Watson, and Chris Lodgson. All right. So this is going to be rich. It's a 3-day colloquium. Now, folks are like, well, why are they charging $50? Well, this is what we do annually. I don't know if they're giving a percentage of it to any of the orgs that will be present. I have no clue. But this is normally what it costs. This is what we do annually. And what I'm saying is bigger than the cost. It's a platform to speak to parishioners all throughout the country about reparations to get them to build what we're doing to critical mass. So we should not disparage what the fee is. It's going to be rich. It's going to be epic. And the date that I'm scheduled to be on there is on Friday the 20th. But the $50 gets you the 19th to the 21st. Thursday and Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Saturday from 10 to 2. And it's going to be via Zoom, and it's going to be live at the Universal Truth Center I can't read that address. It's on 37th Avenue in Miami Gardens, Florida. And then to get registered, you must go to www.jctseminary.org/reparations. So it's going to be epic, and I'm going to finally get to weigh in on what the Bible says about reparations. It is a debt that is owed in the quadrillions over multi-generations, and I am pleased to be amongst my comrades here and those throughout the country to be in this fight for reparative justice. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you so much, Angela. That is fire. We are looking forward to it. And without further ado, I'm going to jump right into this show because, as you know, fam, an hour just drifts by. I want to start with setting the stage and letting you know that usually we will have a religious leader working on the guests in the guest seat, and one of the fire speakers this evening, Derrick Williams, or Cynthia McDonald, or Arthur Ward, or a combination of the three, will be in the counterpoint chair going forward. But we thought for this inaugural show, we introduce the three hosts because they're coming from different perspectives. They all three have a wealth of knowledge, and we just want to set the stage for the energy and the background that they bring to the table. So without further ado, I'll start with ladies first, and set the stage for Cynthia McDonald. She is an infectious disease medical case manager where she works with people living with HIV in the city of Chicago. She authors a blog called Freedmen Health and Wellness.com, which speaks on the social detriments of health of Black Americans that descend from chattel slavery. She is a speaker and has been a guest on several podcasts, speaking on political and health advocacy, economic, and social justice. She is a regular host on the nonprofits produced by the atheist community of Austin and Women Atheists Upload, produced by the Secular Haven channel. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Cynthia. I'm going to move right into giving you a little background about Derrick Williams. He is an activist, he's an advocate for U.S. reparations for the descendants of American freedmen. He is also a former member of the Prince George's County NAACP and a current member of the advocacy group known as the DMV Freedmen, established in the greater Washington, D.C. area. Derrick's current focus is expanding the conversation on reparations for American freedmen amongst the religion and amongst the religious community with the hope of gaining its support in this fight. I'm going to actually turn the mic over to my brother Arthur Ward. He is going to present himself, and since he will give you a little information about himself, I would like him to take the lead and set the table after he does his introductions. Arthur, are you prepared? You ready to join us? Maybe not. Maybe we should keep with the ladies and keep them first. We'll pass the baton. Oh, wait a minute. Arthur jumped
No,
in.
no,
He's playing double dutch. Okay. He back in.
uh, okay. Yes, I'm Arthur Ward. I'm just an ordinary citizen with very little education, but a lot of, how shall I say, literary understanding. I'm the vice president of Freedmen, the Freedmen Descendants of Chicago, and I've been involved in civil rights and movement
Arthur,
activities to move my people forward ever since I was a teenager.
Arthur,
Um, and now I'm loving what I'm doing as a reparationist. But at this point, I've been an atheist ever since I was like 13 years old. And the reason why I became an atheist is because, first of all, I read the Bible and I found many things in there that were very problematic. And I also looked at the visceral or epistemological level of looking at Black people and our relationship with Christianity and faith. And to me, at the time, it didn't seem like God was doing much for us. So it finally came to a point that I dispensed entirely with religion and then became more active in intellectual pursuits and on the ground, just putting in the work to do what I can do to move our people forward, both economically and politically. So that's my spiel for right now.
All
Hello?
right. Yeah, this is
Okay.
Natalie. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to make sure that we have all of our audio working and we're good to go. You sounded great, Arthur. Kelly,
Okay.
you're good?
testing. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. It's just not going through your mic, but that's okay. You can keep on going. Thank you.
You can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. I will pass the baton back to Cynthia and have her uh, uh, join us with her perspective.
Yes. Well, I have been doing movement work for the past 3 years. Um, I started off with working with American descendants of slavery, specifically in the Chicago area. We had a chapter called Adolph's Chicago, now called Freedmen Descendants of Chicago. Currently serve as the general secretary. Matter of fact, the person who's going to be on the panel that's actually speaking at the colloquium, Marlon Watson, is our president. I've been an atheist since 2018. I was a theist for the majority of my life. However, I went through a period in my life where I started to question a lot, and I kind of was trying to find, I guess, Jesus or God or the like, in different areas, because I was no longer finding that particular entity in Christianity. Um, Once I did my searching, and I went through a lot. I went through different inceptions of it. I remember I was looking at other spiritual practices, like I looked at Hinduism. I looked a little bit at ancestral worship, and even, like, found like some other practices with spiritualism, like yoga, to be a conduit of what I would possibly think of as spiritualism, but um, they never really fit the bill. I finally I found Buddhism by speaking with a friend of mine who also was in the movement as well. And I started to practice Buddhism. And through practicing Buddhism, I found myself to not believe in God anymore. It was a very long journey. It was a journey based on reasoning, and just like looking for different areas where, you know, does this really make sense? Now, and then after, even through my questioning, I would learn more and more about the positionality of Black Americans that come from chattel slavery, and had to ask the same question that Arthur had. Is like, if we as a people are um, so spiritual, and according to the Pew Research, about 79% of African Americans actually are identifying as Christian. Uh, Atheists are like less than a percent, less than 1%. And I believe that the non or the irreligious are like around 18% now. How come we don't necessarily have the position that the Bible supposedly says that we're supposed to have? Now, I remember being in church, because, like, like I said, I was a theist for the majority of my life. I ended up getting saved and practiced and being a non-denominational Christian when I was early in college, and I was very active in the church. And a lot of times, we would listen to sermons that says that, you can have anything that you ask. All you need to do is just ask in the name. Or, if you ask, so if whatsoever you want, if you ask in the will of God, he shall grant it to you. I'm paraphrasing, but these are the things that was talked about. Or even like, will a man rob God? If yet ye have robbed me in thy tithes and thy offerings, bring ye the tithes into the storehouse, that they may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will not open up a window and open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing that you will not have room enough to receive. And these a lot of times was touted to us as, as like, especially with the flourishment of like the prosperity doctrine. However, it seemed like it worked for a lot of prosperity preachers, but it was not working for us as freedmen. And for people who are very devoted to this ideology, and very committed to making sure that the church doors are open, paying your tithes, giving your offering, making sure that all these things are set and what have you. We have a lot of churches next to a lot of liquor stores in our particular communities, but we do not have prosperity. And we know that a lot of times the prosperity is lacking because of white supremacy, racism, white supremacy, as Dr. Francis Cresswellsian and Neely Fuller would put it. And we can point to different inferences why that is the case. But even if we can point to those things, and we know that racism in the system itself was not invented by us per se, um, the only ones that can actually fix it are the human beings on this earth right now, because if God is there, he is very silent. So I am more of the mind of being a champion of making sure that people who are us know us and also are more informed about political activism, political education, and really being more involved in what it takes in order for us to push a political agenda that is for us, by us, and with us. And I would be foolhardy to assert that we cannot do this without coalitioning with Christians, with Black Christians, because there's such a large portion of them, and and even though we may not necessarily agree on belief, we do agree that repair is way past due, and it definitely will take all of us who have this mindset to actually put uh, hand to plow to make it happen. Yeah, that's my spiel.
Awesome, awesome. Uh, I, for one, and I was speaking with other DMV Freedmen about this in our meeting this week. Um, this is powerful for me just to hear from your story and how you went from Christianity to Buddhism to, you know what, I just don't believe in this. I can't, if it don't fit, don't force it. And I don't think many of us freedmen have seen fellow freedmen that are full throated atheists or agnostic. And that's why this is the powerful hour that you will find on the web, because we are doing things unconventional. We have our own mind. We are free thinking freedmen. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton to my brother Derek, because if anybody knows him, this brother has something to say.
And thanks for having me. Can y'all hear me okay? All right, great. All right, so I'm gonna start off very briefly, just giving a small background about myself. I was born and raised in the Northern Virginia, Greater Washington, D.C. area. Around the time of 7 years old, I was baptized Southern Baptist Church in Arlington at Mount Olive. Um, my family background is primarily American freedmen, but there are admixture. My uncle was a Muslim. Mm, he converted to Orthodox Islam sometime before I was born, which was before the 1980s. And so I grew up with a presence of Islam and Christianity in my life at a young age. At 12 years old, I considered converting to Islam and moving in that direction due to that influence. That did not happen. By 16, um, I essentially gravitated towards the teachings of the philosophies of Rastafari. And in high school, I took comparative religions because religion has kind of always been something that was interesting to me. And the presence of God, I would say, is something that was always there with me also as well. I appreciate everything that everyone said because they really touched on many of the things that I feel strongly about this subject. I personally come from the position where I think that Black America, specifically the American freedmen, need to have a theology that works for them in in our lives, like socially. I don't think that a theology where you appear to have to separate race, which is something that a person lives every day, um, from your theological principles or your positions is going to be one that's going to help collective groups very much. So, with regards to your personal relationship, I can understand how that would be something that's beneficial. But when you're a person who's a part of a specific group, as Cynthia has articulated, as Arthur has articulated, it becomes the lens becomes a bit larger, I would say. So for me, I started to look at the history of our people, also what Cynthia and Arthur touched on. And as I began to understand more about the history of our people, I began to understand that Christianity was something that came to us. So we converted, if you will, we came to Jesus. It's not like that is an original belief system, which is fine. But the understanding that happened to us when we were in a circumstance of slavery has to also be factored in also as well. So for me, it if you for me the way I see it is if you don't have a God who can be in the thick or can be in the middle of your social circumstances, um, then you have a dilemma. You have a problem. It's either you're going to have to create a form of a new theology or reform one, or you're going to have to give that God up and find one that's going to stick with you. That's essentially what it comes down to. So I personally think that the direction of Black liberation theology is the direction for Black Americans, American freedmen to go, because I believe that a theology where the nucleus of it is wrapped around the people is what's going to be necessary for us spiritually, but also socially. I don't think you can separate one from the other. I want to say one last thing there that pertaining to the initial question that we had, which was how does religion fit into the context of reparations for American freedmen, or simply put, where is justice Jesus? What I would say is this, that I'm both fascinated and also to some degree disappointed with the church, because the reparations movement essentially started off with the church. There was really not a separation at the end of the 19th century. And the woman who's recognized for spearheading the reparations movement, or at that point in time, it was the ex slaves mutual pension, bounty pension, right, was Callie House, who was born a slave in 1861. But by the late 1800s, she had taken it upon herself to actually move around the churches, which is where she got people to get involved. And they started chapters all around the country. And her organization ended up having over 300,000 members. So the way I see it is that the church should actually be spearheading the reparations movement, and from a social perspective. And then when you look at it from just a religious perspective, I would think that Jesus, knowing our story best per se, would want to be there right there with us, that there wouldn't be any separation. And in fact, that's what I see. I see that the church is even split with this issue. Now, to be fair, there are some churches, although very few, that have taken it upon themselves to involve themselves in the reparation movement. But the vast majority, the predominant majority of churches in a whole, but also Black churches, have not. And like I said, that kind of fascinates me in some way, that the repair of the people that you're a part of, that God wouldn't be a part of that, or seemingly so, that would be something that you could put on the back burner. That's amazing to me. As I said, it's fascinating. But thank you for letting me speak, and I'll mute my mic.
Awesome, awesome. Arthur,
May I say something, Kelly?
please, please.
Hello. Oh, okay. You know what? I don't think that's fascinating at all. If you really notice in terms of the spiritual makeup of the country, the more empowered people are in the secular world, in business, in politics, and all areas in which levers are being pulled and things are being run, those are the people that have less need for churches. They have less involvement with religion. You know, you look at the richest areas in the country, they're devoid mostly of churches. But as you go down the economic scale in a particular area, the poorer the people are, the more the church is. It is not in the interest, especially of the black church, for black people to become empowered. Because even though, like, we still have, amongst all ethnic groups in the country, the highest church attendance, that is going down as well. And these millennials and younger people are just simply peeling away from the church. Now, they may believe in God, but they're not signing up for church. And as far as Christianity as an overall philosophy, yes, Callie House and many of our heroes in civil rights and post slavery activism were themselves Christian. Uh, but the reason why they had to go to the church is because that's where all the people were, not necessarily because of the philosophy. That's where all the people were. Okay, and so you go where the people are for efficiency in terms of activism. But the philosophy itself, I believe truly that Christianity has functioned as a mental millstone around our heads, and it has muted and blunted our ability to aggressively come together as a team to try to get on top of other teams like the white team and the Hispanic team and the Asian team, because we're so busy loving the other team, we don't have an opportunity to try to look into our own humanity and build ourselves from within. We're too busy looking for Jesus. It's, to me, it's kind of crazy. So I do think that if there was more non-belief within the black community, that there would be more mental room for concrete things in the here and now and taking care of our politics, which is the source of our resources. That's what I
And
think.
may I piggyback on something that Arthur was saying? Um, Arthur and I recently interviewed on the one of the shows that I co-host, Atheist Women Unload, Jeremiah Kamara. And Jeremiah Kamara is a speaker, he's a business person, and he's also a filmmaker. And in 2013, he released a film that's actually on Amazon Prime right now called Contradiction. And it was specifically about this particular topic when they were talking about the prevalency of Christianity within the Black American community, but not wealth. And we found it to be a phenomenon, and Arthur just mentioned it, that the higher the belief, whether if it's in our particular community or other communities that happen to be around the world, you have a higher prevalency of poverty. Now, one of the things that I would say, and I believe that we can all kind of attest to when we're speaking about slavery, is that our ancestors utilized some of the doctrines, not necessarily liberation theology, but it was more so the doctrine that said that if I just do my due diligence in this world, then I can have my reward in heaven. Well, the problem with that particular thinking is that it keeps you off from doing your due diligence as far as like being able to be free here on earth. Because you're so busy trying to be, as they used to say when I was in church, you're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. And we oftentimes see this particular, and I mean, like, and I may be speaking anecdotally, I may be even speaking from experience, most of experience, but a lot of times, like when I had conversations about reparations with some of our people who happen to also be believers, not everybody, but some, um, it's more of this whole thing about, well, if as long as I do my, my Christian duty, well, we just got to pray about it, yet not necessarily seeking action. Even if we look at Dr. King during the civil rights movement, it was actually only a handful of churches that was really with him when it came to organizing and pushing forward the messages of civil rights. Actually, the majority of Black churches, including white churches, were very much so against him. I remember I recently did I was invited to go on to this other channel where I was doing a commentary specifically on this particular video from a commentator from Answers in Genesis, and he was saying that specifically that Black Lives Matter only in a Christian worldview. But if you look throughout history, and if you look throughout even some of the slave sermons, and also even during the civil rights movement, like during the freedom rides and things of that nature, we saw that, especially with the largest denomination of churches, the Southern Protestant churches, which is the Southern Baptist Convention, you know, it was very much so the opposite. These were people who are not necessarily on board with civil rights, let alone even having equality for Black Americans or those who descend from chattel slavery. And matter of fact, they even mentioned a lot of times that God blessed and Jesus blessed segregation, and that the Blacks should be over here and the whites should be over here, and the whites should be made to prosper and the Blacks should be at the bottom forever and ever. Amen. Because God made it that way. This is the type of sentiment that was oftentimes utilized in America. And we're even seeing that in a lot of cases today with a lot of these white evangelical Christian nationalists who are actually vying for power. You know, they're not just the people who just stormed the gates of the Congress and scream "Trump now forever." These are people who are actually very well organized, and they use their ideology when it comes to separation of races, separation of genders, separation of whatever. Whites are at top, everybody else is at the bottom, or, you know, they're tiered, and Black people, specifically American chattel slavery descendants, are at the bottom. And this is the status quo that we're going to continuously keep going now. So, in this particular fight, you know, mentioning Callie House and, you know, her going to church after Arthur mentioned those are where the people were. But, and as also Arthur has mentioned, the non-religious or the irreligious, not necessarily in church, they may believe in God, are growing exponentially. America right now is at 30% non-church goers right now. And they're in that particular vernacular are mostly young people who also have disengaged even from having these particular conversations about political activism. Those are the people we need to reach, because those are the people who are going to be here tomorrow. You know, I just turned today. Okay. I'm a woman of a certain age right now. And there's going to be plenty of after me that may not necessarily get down with the Jesus message. They may not necessarily get down with, you know, going to church every Sunday, paying tithes, giving offering and all this stuff. If they're definitely, especially if they're not seeing a return. So how do we reach them? How do we actually get them on board with saying that, you know what, I want a better future and I know that I need to fight for it. And it does happen to mean that I have to be involved. And, you know, leading with an ideology that's like, you know, based only in like religion is not going to draw them into this particular fight.
Yes, and to piggyback on,
I do think that Black people are starting to get into more practical thinking patterns. One of the things that that dismays me a lot about our folks is that we spend way too much time even thinking about metaphysics, you know, which is kind of crazy to me. All right. You know, the best physicists out there will tell you that we only got 4% of this down. We only have a 4% understanding of where we can see, feel, eat, sleep, the reality around us. How did you get all the way over here outside of this realm into another realm, and you don't even understand fully where you are right now? That doesn't even make any sense. One of the greatest things that would scare the hell out of white people if Black people wholesale became atheists. And why is that? Because they know that if the Christian church loses its grip on our minds, we might start getting to a place where we start thinking clearly. We might get to a place where we start thinking scientifically and politically and proactively and asset and capital oriented rather than Jesus oriented. We have way too much Jesus and too little money. And we're at a point where Jesus, this whole Christian idea is going to keep us in this welcoming, loving, accepting mode. And the people that are trying to take over are going to take us right out of the game, right off the planet.
Let me hop in there.
And that's where we
And
are
I'd
now.
like to follow up.
That I like the way this conversation is going. I got to say that I agree with a lot of what Arthur and Cynthia said. Um, I don't. I've talked to both of them, so all of our views aren't the same. But a lot of what they said, I think, is just it applies. It's truth. Let me give you guys a quote real quick from James H. Cone. If you guys don't know who James H. Cone is, he's looked at as the father of Black theology. This kind of pertains to where the direction that Cynthia went in. White theology is not Christian theology. Okay, why? Because it is a language about God derived from white supremacy. Okay. To understand Christian identity from a dominant white point of view is like trying to understand Jesus from a dominant Roman point of view. And so this is what I want Black people to understand is that at the end of the day, if you're going to embrace a Christianity, you cannot embrace the Christianity that was given to you. You're going to have to create your own components of that. I've done quite a bit of research with the historical ancient Israel. Uh, this is not going to rub a lot of people well, but all of the things that are written in their ancient texts are not literal. They're not. And some of the things are actually written as if those things happen. So what I'm saying is that the faith aspect is between a person and their creator, their higher power. But it is our right to be able to create a doctrine or a theology, a philosophy that works for our best interest as a group. In other words, if the religion is not actually helping the people, it is not really serving the greatest interest. The idea that these laws were given to Israel was to actually help the people. And when you listen to what's being written in the book, you come to understand that it's not just about being faithful to a God. It's not just about, as Cynthia said, pie in the sky. It's not about just your salvation and saving your soul, but it actually matters what happens here. The greatest gift that you have is your life. So, of course, it would matter the relationship between God and man here, and then what that outcome would be.
Well, I need to jump in here because um, I want to piggyback off of what Derrick just said. You know, let me just share my own story and how I got to metaphysics, which Arthur feels is outlandish, because I don't think you have an understanding of what metaphysics means wherein spirituality is concerned. Metaphysics, with respect to the way we approach the Bible, is reaching beyond the literal. It is studying the word in spirit and in truth, which can't be corrupted. We know that there were over 5,000 manuscripts of this Bible before the word press. If you know anything about how this Bible was comprised. And we know that folks as low on the totem pole as the slaves all the way up to, the people who dominated. We know King James, we know the Nicene Council. We know that there were quite a few people before the word press that took these words and decided to alter the truth and decided to take away books and do all manner of things to corrupt this word. But the one thing that my New Thought Christian Bible-based church has taught me is that they could not corrupt the spiritual manna inherent in the word. So what you see a lot of in many of these churches are people who take this word literally when by and large it's allegorical. And this Bible is a blueprint for how we should live. In the same way, the Quran is to the Islam. Whatever you guys do in terms of Buddhism, everybody has their approach to how to access the God within them, which is where I think Christianity gets it wrong. But that was by design. You had white folks corrupting and co-opting a Bible that pretty much originated from us, African, okay? And they took everything about that and they whitewashed all the figures. And now you've got Black folks celebrating a blue-eyed white Jesus. Well, let me tell you how I got here. I was knee-high to a gatepost when I was made to go to church, Baptist. And I would hear them, talk about us being sinners and wretches. But Genesis 1:26 says, I am made in the image and after the likeness of God. 27 says, I'm with all the mastery, power, dominion, and authority over everything. Well, as a child, I came home and I questioned my mother. How can I be a sinner and a wretch and the image likeness of God at the same time? She had no answers. My granny, who played organ and piano for the church, had no answers. The minister had no answers. The Sunday school teacher had no answers. Anytime I ask a hard question, because of that Christ that's within me, that Buddha that's within me, that Allah that is within me, okay? And whenever something didn't sound right to me, I would pose those questions and ultimately not get the answers I was seeking. So what ultimately happened was my mom told my grandmother, I no longer have to go to church. You don't have to go to church. And my grandmother said, well, what about her salvation? What about her salvation? My mother told her that she will come to learn God in her own time, on her own terms. And so I wasn't forced to go to church anymore. I was left to come to discover the God within me. And I did so reading something altogether secular. Anthony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within. And from that, it led me to Johnny Coleman, who went to the very white seminary to study New Thought, which the white folks didn't want her to bring back to the south side of Chicago. But she was fearless, and she came to the south side of Chicago to teach the people how to be introduced to their inner Christ, to manifest the world that this world full of white supremacists refused to give us. And they used their minds, and those people came up out of their condition. So where you guys are talking about, we're still impoverished, not the people I run with, because they were taught by one of the best on how to use their minds. And the people like them that were also teaching manifestation. They were also teaching not just manifestation, but the New Thought. They were teaching you about your own divinity. They were teaching you that you and the Father were just as much one as Jesus and the Father. Jesus wasn't God in exclusivity. That's where we get it wrong. Jesus appealed to the same Father, Mother, Spirit, Divine when he was placed on that cross. Okay? He always appealed when he was being challenged in this world. He appealed to the Christ, his divinity. And that's why he was killed. And when the Pharisees and the Sadducees begged the question, who do you think you are? As if he was different than they. And he told them, did not tell you
well,
that
I
you
have to
were
add
also
after all
God.
that, Angela.
I'm sorry?
Okay. Well, after all that, Angela, I would have to ask, where's the money?
Okay,
After
excuse
all
me.
that,
I
where
didn't finish
is
my
the
thought.
money?
I didn't finish my thought.
Okay.
You see, you can't. It's not about money raining from the sky. That's another misnomer. You can't appeal
Yes,
to
it
God.
is.
It's not about money raining from the sky. It's about God ideas that manifest that money. God gives you
It
ideas. He
is
don't
for
rain
white
money from the
people.
sky.
They're getting it. How come God ain't spreading it to us?
Hold on 1 second, guys.
They
I
are
gotta let my
definitely
daughter
getting it.
in.
God,
Hold on.
if there is anything, if there is a God, if there is any people that He is looking out for, it is definitely the white people. I will
Well,
say that if I was white, I'd get up every damn morning and praise God to the high heaven that I'm a white man and is able to enjoy all of His blessings and enjoyments because He sure ain't giving it to us. And
yeah.
and if this particular information source that has given you all of this particular enlightenment about this metaphysics that you just talked about, I would say that it would be a merciful thing for him to take the time to spread it out to the rest of us because millions of us have definitely missed that message, despite the fact that we have more churches per capita than any other ethnic group in this country.
Two things though, Arthur. One, I want to say that
Yes,
the white evangelical Christian community is able to decompartmentalize their faith and their politics. And to me, that's something that
sure.
we don't do well. It's like we're
Uh,
Yes,
Brother Derek, not
yeah,
not not always. Because in actuality, especially when we look at the history of the rise of the white evangelical, when it comes, especially when it came to politics over the last 50 years, it was absolutely utilizing their belief systems and how they're structured
right,
in order for them to gain political power.
right.
So to say that they actually were able to compartmentalize their theology or their ideology when it comes to their belief in politics, actually, no, they utilize that. But if we actually look at the
yes,
historical evidence concerning even when it came to this tiered system of like where people belong, remember that when you started to separate the differences between the indentured servants who were coming from Europe versus the Africans that were coming in and they were actually going into slavery, you can see a lot of that, started to take shape in a series of laws and court decisions in your neck of the woods,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Correct.
Now, along with this particular separation when it came to really shaping what does white supremacy, especially in America, look like, and the foundation of that is slavery, the whole notion of how do we actually categorize this people and actually make them to service us in what they were trying to do was in perpetuity was through their doctrine of their belief. There was the curse of Cain. We've all heard of that. Black folk are the descendants of of Cain. Therefore, we've been cursed with a curse, and in perpetuity, supposed to be servants forever. Then there was the curse of Ham. Ham saw Noah naked and drunk, and therefore he cursed him and his descendants. And therefore, we carry that curse in perpetuity and should be service unto the people who are not of Ham until Jesus comes back and maybe then later. And then we even have the other portion of believers, like the Mormons, who believed up into the 1970s that Michael, and who is Jesus, and Satan or Lucifer fought a war in a different world that was heaven, and they were supposed, and the ones who did not choose a side, they were indifferent on who they were going to be on to be with. They were cursed, and that curse was the mark of their skin.
Hmm.
So those who actually carried a darker hue was also cursed by God. So this is an idea that has traversed from one European descendant after another, especially that's very much so locked in with their belief. So
Right.
those who are actually have the belief system of, and a funny even thing about, what you mentioned, Angela, I respect you and love you dearly. But the problem, even, utilizing terminology like spirituality and metaphysics and things of those nature, is that they're unfalsifiable. We don't have a means to be able to test these particular methodologies to even see if they work out to be real or not. The only thing that we can go by any of these things is faith. The substance of things hoped for, and the
The
evidence of
evidence.
things not seen.
That's right.
Hebrews 11:1.
That's
But
right.
that's a problem.
Well, it's
Because
not a problem.
let me just finish this thought here, sis.
Okay, because I got to jump.
Oh,
And I'm
understand.
not, I really want to finish my thought. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but I do have a meeting. Listen, family,
Yeah,
what
go
I
ahead. Go
come to
ahead, sis.
understand is my own divinity. And I think that that's where teaching the Bible from a white lens, um, because they corrupted it so much, um, I think that that's where it fails us epically. And I am a living, walking testament of a New Thought Christian who is in this fight, who I believe this colloquium has made great progress in at least having us on, even if it's just to have this kind of conversation. I don't know what those 3 days will entail, but I will explain what the Bible says according to the God within me. uh, I will be sharing that at that colloquium to try to make it as plain as I can with the few minutes I've got on this particular colloquium. And I want to thank you guys for the rich conversation. But I do know that once I stopped seeing myself as separate and apart from God, I was able to start manifesting. I took the God ideas I was given to create the experience I currently have here on the West Coast. And it's rich and it's epic. And had I continued to see myself as separate and apart, I would be having the same experiences as many of us that struggle. So, with that being said, I thank you so much for having me. You guys make it a beautiful, God inspired rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one, Angela.
All right.
Mm.
All right.
This is fire. I'm going to jump right in. We have
Yes.
coming up on our hour mark, and this conversation is so heavy. I think it's saying part two. I think that we have just scratched the surface. Um,
Hmm.
I think that Arthur hit the nail on the head that, the pastors are there because that's where the people are. And when we draw a line straight
Hmm.
back to slavery, we see that the people were there because that was the only place they allowed us to have institution. That's the only place they allowed us
Right.
to have communion. That was the first place many of us spoke in front of a live audience, and we learned our speaking skills there. The Bible was the only thing they allowed us to
Hmm.
read what we could read. So
Right.
that's why the
Most of it
people
was
are
Right.
there. So there is no, it's no mystery why we're still there, because everything about our life drives a straight line right back to slavery, and
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was a matter of practicality.
somehow our congressional Black Caucus representatives wants to do a study on what we already know. Um, and what we already know is,
Right.
and I'm a Christian, by the way. I'm not. I was raised
Oh,
in.
okay.
Um, I was raised to think, I thought that making $1 out of 15 cents was God bridging the gap because we had something special with us.
Right.
So things that we have
Exactly.
been taught
You
and
know.
groomed for is a lot of it is rooted in our slave past. And
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
institution, our
Yeah.
strongest institution, is not taking the lead, and here we are trying to pull Dr. King up out his grave to get his people to get behind us Um,
Well, you
to
know what? Our downfall, part
aligning
of our
with what
downfall,
God is looking. Go ahead,
but you know
Arthur.
what, Kelly? Part of our downfall is the fact that the church is our strongest institution. If we are really about the business of rising as a people in a capitalist society like America, the church has no business being our strongest institution. No
Yo, Arthur,
business whatsoever.
You
we
gonna
gonna
you
we
gonna
gonna have
set it off on part
we're
two.
gonna have to break. Yeah, we're gonna have to break this down because me and Arthur had this conversation, and he brings up a good point with regard to philosophy.
Yeah,
But I said you will not find a civilization that doesn't believe in a deity. Check. Which is why I am a proponent of people who believe in whatever belief system they believe in and utilizing that to pull them up, right? Because there hasn't been one, not that I
right.
found. If you guys find one, please, let me know. With that being said, he had a
Yeah,
strong point the other day when we talked that the philosophy, the frame of thinking, right, the framework needs to change. That I don't think we will have any disagreement on is that there needs to be a change and it needs to be something that benefits us as a
hmm
collective. That's one thing when you talk about your personal relationship, but when you're a part of 36 or 40 million people, how is
yeah,
God playing a part in that? And that's really where it comes to, where it hits me at home is that how I feel about myself or how I feel that God feels about me as a whole is one thing. But
hmm
when I'm a part of a people group who have an origin, how does God fit into the context of that? Right. And so,
Or does he even
or
fit in at
does he?
all?
Right. Or does he? Can he? Right. So
right.
to me, that conversation is pertinent. I know it's very provocative for a lot of people, but it's one that we need to have. Yeah, I really think it is because we're at a crossroads here where socially we're trying to do something as a collective group, right? And Cynthia said very well that there are certain aspects about the current Christianity, at least doctrine of it, that probably aren't going to let that happen because they're not conducive. They're just not. So the conversation
Right.
needs to be had. I'm looking forward to be continued, and thanks for letting me chime in.
I just wanted to
Mm.
say one thing and then I'll shut up. I promise I'll make it very short because I know that we're at our time. Um, I will say this one thing that I will give Angela concerning her belief. And this is also a problem that happens to befall our people when it comes to belief. The belief makes you look outside of yourself. It makes you look outside of yourself. I'm going to say it one more time. It makes you look outside of yourself. When you look outside of yourself, you take power away from yourself. You take presence away from yourself. You take ability away from yourself. And you place that responsibility on something that you can't even prove is there. I will say this one more thing. When I came to terms with my non belief, I cried because I realized that for all these years that I've been believing in this particular deity, and I always believed that at my lowest point, God got me, right?
Yeah, right.
But then when I realized that all those years that I was looking for something to get me, that wasn't him. So what's going to get me now? I don't have a safety net anymore. It made me feel very fearful and alone. And then I had to kind of like, bring myself back and say, well, if you were okay here and you were okay here and you were okay here, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be okay in the future, you know? And a lot of it is because like I had to learn to stop looking outside of myself to get the things that I need to get done for myself. I know I've lived a far happier existence when I've done that because a lot of the fears and the tethers that come from religious belief are no longer there. And I understand how people will utilize that term that religion is not relationship, and people may have a religious like a Christian doctrine to follow, but not necessarily um but that's just like ritual, that's like like man's standards or what have you. That's not really like a spiritual practice in God. You still have to have that religious framework to get you there,
Yes, absolutely.
and when you think about that, you it's very separate. At least it's very difficult, rather, at least especially for me, to really
Right.
separate that aspect of being religious or being spiritual in relationship. And
Yes. The other thing
I'm
that
looking
religion
forward
does
to
is that
my part two.
right. The other thing that religion does that it poisons your ability to make really good decisions in the here and now, because you're tethering it to something that is metaphysical, not proven to exist. I can't say that God doesn't exist, but as far as I can see, he doesn't, and he really doesn't exist for us. So I can't use that because I don't see anything there to be used. And then to push back on her on Angela's thing about looking deeper in the Bible, I disagree with that. I think that all of the Bible must be literally considered. Every word must be weighed evenly across the board. And why? Because in its literalness, the Bible is rightly or should be considered to literally be the word of God as it is before interpretational processing. No all wise being would intentionally make such an important message to those that he supposedly loves so incredibly difficult to get at or open. No part of that message would be esoterically locked up or would explain anything metaphorically or would have any need for third parties like clergy to explain anything to anybody for him or for any statements from him to intentionally be open to potentially dishonest man-made interpretive processes. He wouldn't and you wouldn't. Therefore, and I don't think there is not or shouldn't be one verse or passage in the Holy Bible that can be legitimately ignored, overlooked, marginalized, subjected to hermeneutical or
Arthur, you
apologetical
froze.
processing. Does everyone understand that?
Uh,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
Arthur took the fundamentalist approach.
Yeah, you did.
It's a
And you
fundamentalist approach. Yeah,
right. And I was trying to tell you, save that for part two. We should get into that.
yeah, definitely.
Save that for part two. We over time. Arthur,
We,
I
we're
know it's supposed to be these
overtime.
conversations. God damn you. I'm just kidding.
This has been an awesome, awesome, a little more than an hour. We didn't stick to our hour, but we needed
Yeah.
this edification. I want to thank my co hosts, Cynthia McDonald, Derrick Williams, Arthur Ward, co producer Natalie Roselle, Divided People Media Group for producing this inaugural rare episode, our maiden voyage. And no matter what your religious affiliation is, or what you subscribe to, or none at all, I believe that our challenge is to turn to what we know is right into righteous action, to walk towards the light of truth with no fear,
Mhm.
and to keep walking until we see generational, transformational, and transformative change. I think that a lot of what we feel about Christianity is how we was taught in our own little churches. In my little church, I was taught that God is within me. So I don't look outside of me for God. I look in within for the God in me, and I don't look for God to do anything for me because I feel like if I am Him and He is me, then when I put feet on my prayers, I will prevail. That's just, that was my edification. But I want to immensely thank everyone for joining us. We look forward to connecting with you each and every Thursday, every other Thursday, for conversation, for community, for communion, for connection, and again, to put fire under folks. So, for those of us that are Christian, that are Buddhists, that subscribe to Islam or any other faith, put feet on those prayers. God is not descending from anywhere. We are the change, and we need to see that within ourselves and unify as a freedmen people and push this reparations agenda. So, family, I want to invite you to join us, not next Thursday, but the Thursday thereafter on May the 26th. We will be here right before the Memorial Day holiday at 7 p.m. And we're going to try our darndest to start on time and end on time. But this is a religious set folks. So you know what that means. We're gonna do everything but pass the plate. But that might be next. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.